My parents threw my 8-year-old daughter out into a storm after believing her cousin's lie. 3 hours later, the police called me from the hospital. When my father arrived and learned the truth, he could barely stand. Hello everyone, my name is Rebecca Turner. I'm 36 years old, and the worst phone call of my life didn't come from my parents. It came from a police officer. Ms. Turner. Yes? I'm Officer Daniel Brooks, with the Cedar Falls Police Department. We've located your daughter. For one terrifying second, I couldn't breathe. I gripped the nurse's station so hard, my fingers turned white. My daughter, is she okay? There was a pause. She's alive, but she's been taken to Memorial Hospital with signs of hypothermia. The world around me disappeared. Just 3 hours earlier, I'd left my 8-year-old daughter safely at my parents' house. Or at least, I thought she was safe. Looking back, I should have known better, because my parents had spent years believing my younger sister's daughter over mine. Every single time. My daughter Sophie was 8 years old. Quiet, kind, the type of child who apologized when someone bumped into her. She loved drawing horses, reading mystery books, and baking cookies with me every Sunday. She wasn't perfect. No child is. But she never lied, not once. My younger sister, Melissa, had a daughter named Ava. They were only 6 months apart. Growing up, everyone assumed they'd become inseparable. Instead, Ava quickly learned something. Whenever she blamed Sophie, adults believed her. If a toy broke, Sophie must have done it. If someone colored on the wall, it was probably Sophie. Even when evidence proved otherwise, Mom always defended Ava. She's just more emotional. Dad agreed. Ava wouldn't make something like that up. Eventually, Sophie stopped defending herself. One afternoon, she quietly asked me, "Mom, why doesn't Grandpa believe me?" I hugged her tightly. "He loves you." She looked down at her shoes. "Then why does he always think I'm the bad kid?" I didn't have an answer. After my divorce, I worked as an emergency room nurse. The shifts were long, the hours unpredictable. Thankfully, my parents often watched Sophie whenever I was unexpectedly called in. At least, when Melissa didn't need them first. If Melissa called, everything changed. Dad once left Sophie's piano recital halfway through because Ava had forgotten her soccer cleats. Mom skipped Sophie's school science fair because Melissa wanted help painting her living room. Every disappointment came with the same explanation. "You understand. Melissa needs us." Eventually, I stopped arguing. Then came the Thursday that changed everything. A severe thunderstorm was expected that evening. Dark clouds already covered the sky. Just after lunch, my supervisor called. "We've had several nurses call in sick. Can you cover the evening shift?" I hesitated, then agreed. The emergency department was overwhelmed. Before leaving, I called Mom. "Could Sophie stay with you until I'm off?" "Of course. We'll have dinner. Watch a movie. Don't worry." At 4 o'clock, I dropped Sophie off. She hugged me tightly. "I'll see you tonight. I love you. I love you more." Those were the last words I heard from her before everything fell apart. Around 6:30, Melissa arrived with Ava. Apparently, they'd decided to eat dinner together. I wouldn't learn that until much later. According to witnesses, everything was normal. Until dessert, Mom owned a delicate porcelain music box that had belonged to my grandmother. Everyone knew it was special. The girls had been coloring nearby. Suddenly, the music box crashed onto the hardwood floor. It shattered into dozens of pieces. Mom gasped. Dad rushed into the room. Before anyone asked what happened, Ava immediately pointed at Sophie. "She did it." Sophie burst into tears. "I didn't." Ava bumped the table. Melissa immediately wrapped her arms around Ava. My daughter wouldn't lie. Dad looked directly at Sophie. "So you're calling your cousin a liar?" Sophie cried harder. "I'm telling the truth." Mom quietly picked up the broken porcelain pieces. Dad's face turned bright red. "I've had enough." According to the police report, he pointed toward the front door. "Get out. I don't need a lying granddaughter in my house." Mom reportedly whispered, "Maybe she needs a few minutes to think." Nobody stopped him. Nobody walked Sophie outside. Nobody called me. Nobody even checked whether the storm had already started. My 8-year-old daughter walked out the front door. Alone. Rain poured from the sky. Thunder shook the neighborhood. She waited on the porch for several minutes, hoping someone would call her back inside. No one did. Eventually, she started walking. She later told officers she thought she could walk home, except home was nearly 4 miles away. The rain became heavier. The temperature dropped quickly. Traffic was poor because of the storm. A passing delivery driver noticed a little girl walking alone beside the road, completely soaked, shivering uncontrollably. He stopped immediately. Sophie was confused, scared, and barely able to answer questions. He called 911. Paramedics arrived within minutes. By then, her lips had already turned blue. While all this happened, I was treating patients, completely unaware. Just after 9 o'clock, the charge nurse walked toward me. "Rebecca, there's a police officer waiting." I assumed someone had been in a car accident. Instead, Officer Brooks quietly introduced himself, then told me my daughter had been admitted to the pediatric unit. I don't even remember leaving the emergency department. Another nurse drove me upstairs because my hands were shaking too badly to hold my car keys. When I entered Sophie's hospital room, she looked impossibly small, curled beneath thick blankets, an IV in one arm, warm air blowing through special warming blankets around her body. A pediatric nurse quietly smiled. "She's going to recover." Relief hit me so hard, my knees nearly gave out. Then, the officer began explaining what had happened. Every sentence hurt more than the one before. I listened without interrupting, without crying, without speaking, because if I started, I wasn't sure I'd ever stop. Almost an hour later, the hospital room door slowly opened. Dad stepped inside. The moment he saw Sophie asleep in the hospital bed, his hands began trembling uncontrollably. Mom stood frozen in the doorway behind him. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them seemed able to. Sometimes, the hardest part isn't discovering that someone failed your child. It's realizing they chose to believe a lie instead of protecting someone who trusted them completely. As my father slowly walked into the hospital room and saw my daughter sleeping beneath warm blankets, I knew the next conversation would change our family forever. Dad stood frozen beside the hospital bed. He looked at Sophie, at the fourth in her arm, at the heated blankets wrapped around her tiny body, then back at me. His lips trembled. I didn't know. I slowly stood. "No, you didn't, because you never asked." Mom finally stepped into the room. Tears streamed down her face. "Rebecca, I'm so sorry." I looked at her. "Sorry for what?" "For, everything." "No, be specific." The room fell silent. Dad lowered his eyes. "I threw her out." "Yes, I believed Ava." "Yes, I didn't even listen to Sophie." "No, you didn't." The police officer quietly remained near the doorway, not speaking, just observing. Dad looked at him. "When they told me, I thought," his voice broke completely, "I thought she'd gone to her room." The officer answered calmly, "No, sir. Your granddaughter walked nearly 2 miles in heavy rain. If that delivery driver hadn't stopped." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Dad slowly sank into a chair, covered his face, then began crying. Not quietly, not politely, the kind of crying that comes when someone realizes a single decision could have destroyed everything. Mom walked towards Sophie's bed. She reached for her hand. I gently stepped between them. "No." Mom froze. "Please, I just want to hold her." "No. Rebecca, not today. You lost that privilege." She nodded slowly. "I understand." "No, I don't think you do." I pointed toward my daughter. "She didn't lose your grandmother's music box. She lost something much bigger. She lost the feeling that her grandparents would protect her." Nobody spoke. Several minutes later, a soft knock came at the door. Melissa walked in, holding Ava's hand. Ava looked terrified. The moment she saw Sophie, she burst into tears. I lied. The entire room turned toward her. Melissa looked stunned. "What?" Ava sobbed. "I bumped the table. I broke the music box. I got scared. So, I blamed Sophie." The room became completely silent. Melissa stared at her daughter. "You told us Sophie pushed it." Ava nodded through tears. "I didn't want Grandpa to be mad at me." Dad looked as though the air had been knocked out of him. He slowly whispered, "My God, I never even gave Sophie a chance." Melissa immediately turned toward me. "I swear, I didn't know. I believed Ava." I answered quietly, "Just like Mom, just like Dad." The officer wrote something in his notebook, then looked at Dad. "Sir, I hope you'll remember something. Children sometimes lie because they're scared. Adults are supposed to investigate, not punish first." Dad couldn't even look at him. The pediatric doctor entered a few minutes later. "Good news. Her temperature is back to normal. We're keeping her overnight for observation. She should recover completely." Recover. The word should have brought relief. Instead, all I could think was how close we'd come to hearing something else. That night, I never left Sophie's bedside. Around 3 in the morning, she finally opened her eyes. She looked around the room, then saw me. "Mom," I immediately took her hand. "I'm here." She smiled weakly. "I knew you'd come." Those 5 words shattered what little strength I had left. I kissed her forehead. "I will always come." She looked toward the doorway. "Is Grandpa mad?" I swallowed hard. "No, he isn't." "Did I break the music box?" Before I could answer, Ava quietly walked into the room with Melissa. She looked at Sophie, then whispered, "No, I did. I'm sorry. Sophie looked surprised. You told them. Ava nodded. I shouldn't have lied. Sophie smiled softly. It's okay. Children, somehow, forgive much faster than adults. Epilogue. It's been 4 years since that storm. Sophie is 12 now. She still loves drawing. She still smiles at strangers. But she never again asked to stay alone with my parents. I never asked her to. For almost a year, there was no contact. My parents respected that. Dad attended counseling, not because anyone forced him, because he couldn't forgive himself. One afternoon, he mailed Sophie a handwritten letter. It wasn't filled with excuses. It contained only one sentence. I failed to protect you, and I will spend the rest of my life proving I can become the grandfather you deserved that day. He never expected a reply. 3 weeks later, Sophie wrote back, I'm still scared sometimes, but maybe one day we can make new memories. They did, slowly, with boundaries, with supervision, with trust that had to be earned, not assumed. As for Ava, she learned one of the hardest lessons a child can learn. One lie can hurt someone far beyond what you ever imagined. She and Sophie eventually became friends again, not because everyone forgot, because everyone finally chose honesty. My thoughts. Looking back, the storm wasn't the greatest danger my daughter faced that night. The greatest danger was that the adults responsible for protecting her chose certainty over compassion. It takes only seconds to accuse a child. It takes years to rebuild the trust those accusations can destroy. Since that day, I've made one promise to my daughter. If the whole world tells me she's guilty, I will still listen to her before I make my judgment, because every child deserves at least one adult who believes they're worth hearing. And sometimes, being believed is the first step toward feeling safe again.